All right, this morning I decided to take a different perspective. Last night, the channel generated more views than I ever have in one day. Yesterday was records were broken on the channel. I think it was just because of the sheer amount that I uploaded. And yesterday, I think half of my videos were self creations, like the one that you're listening to now. So I woke up, I thought about what I've been doing on the channel a lot. And then I decided to flip the script. Let's take a view of the problems that I talk about on this channel from their perspective. So I wrote two huge paragraphs. I submitted them to ChatGPT. Write me a script from the perspective of a very rich, angry man at society. And this is what it generated. Because from their perspective, all of us should be kissing their rear end. And these talking points are exactly how every single one of them feels about us. They don't like us. They don't want us around. They don't want to treat us like human beings. They don't want to give us benefits. They don't want us to have health care. They want us to literally sit in a corner of a box, shivering and waiting for them to give us employment. And I'm not kidding you. This isn't just some dystopian crap. This is exactly the way that they think. Because if you're not rich, you're not human. And so when I was reading through the script, I was like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I made this. Because I, as a person who's spent my life working for these piece of crap people, I know why we're not getting paid. I know why the rules haven't changed. And I know that it's not popular to say the things that I say on this channel because everyone says that you should be rich. And let's think about that. If everyone was rich, then why would anyone go to work? And then the system would start falling apart very quickly. The second the proletariat doesn't show up to work, it's Monday morning after Thanksgiving. I'm not going to work today, but I'll bet you are. So let's get into some of these talking points, but first let me read the introductory monologue to you. People love to point fingers. When someone struggles financially, they want someone to blame. The government, I do that. The economy, I do that. Their boss, I do that. And more often than not, they point those fingers at people like me, the so called rich business owners. You guys get all that? This is exactly their mentality. And that's why I made this video, because I want you to understand what we're up against when it comes to a corrupt system that that allows systemic poverty to continue minute by minute, and opportunities to escape the wage cage are minimal to none because it's intentional. Because people like this really go out of their way to think of every possible way that the proletariat might come up with to not work anymore. Because none of us want to work. No one wants to work anymore because working sucks. And at the end of the day, if how do I put this? I don't even want to say this is what I wrote in my own story, but a fair wage for a fair day's work. Well, guess what? Including myself, we don't perform a fair day's work. Most of our days at work are spent doing work theater. We work a couple of hours, the rest of the day we spend, tinkering around, thinking about other things, possibly thinking about Susie Rottencrotch in between thinking about how we're going to stretch our next paycheck or what are we going to eat next or wonder what so and so is doing or whether or not your car is going to start at the end of the day. We have a lot of other thoughts. Work isn't something that we're interested, even when we're at work. And this makes every rich person in the world just absolutely just go red in the face when they think of the proletariat showing up at work with no interest in the job that they are doing, including myself. It's like very, very little interest in something that provides almost nothing for you other than the basics. My vacation is over in 2 days. What did I do? Nothing. Why? Because I had no money. Worst of all, I had to go into the hole to fix my Promobile. That's life. That's why it sucks being down here, and why people like this, these entitled rich people, feel like they have so much control over your life. And that's a word that you've been hearing a lot lately on this channel because ChatGPT is using that particular word to understand what's happening in your life. It's all a system of control. The proletariat needs to be controlled because its labor is the machine of creating money for the 1%. So I took 3 paragraphs out of the story. These aren't talking points because I looked at the talking points that it made for the story and they were absolutely awful. Awful. Sometimes ChatGPT does a pretty good job, sometimes it just gets it completely wrong. And for the type of writing and advocacy that I do, you have to be able to do this from your own abilities. You can't rely entirely on ChatGPT for this type of work because it wasn't designed for this. It's designed for facts. It's designed to give you straight answers. It's not designed to do what I do on YouTube. I like using it because it's easy, but sometimes you just have to put it away and go with the raw material. The stories are always the raw material. The outlines that I usually do my videos, well, that's a process. I go through it, I highlight, I put in bold, I make red what I'm going to say, and the rest of it, which is about 90% of it, doesn't get used at all because it's not good for anything. And with that said, let's get into our first talking point here. People say, pay your workers more. But let me ask you, how many of you are willing to pay more for products or services? If I raise wages across the board, prices would go up. Then what? You'd be angry about that too. So the other day, I was getting ready to do a video on Walmart because we all go to Walmart because they have the cheapest prices in town. And we know that that has a domino effect. When you're going to go to a Walmart and you're paying lower prices, they are getting those lower prices by doing shady things. We all know that they're not legit, but we shop there because we have to, because their prices are low enough. And we know that there is a dark side to those low prices. Whoever's making those products, if we're paying $1 for it here in America, someone's making it somewhere else for a penny. That's how bad it is. And their lives are much, much worse, much tougher than ours. But in the same sense, they have to raise prices. But they also know this, that the proletariat doesn't have the money. So they're raising prices, but also dropping the amount of product you're getting and the quality of that product that you're getting. I just opened up a can or a container of chicken that I bought yesterday at Food City. And I couldn't understand why I didn't eat it last night while I was 3 sheets to the wind. Woke up, put it in the microwave. I tried to eat it, and I got through 3 bites of it before I realized that I couldn't eat this. Why? Because the quality of it was gross. And so even though they're going to raise the prices, the quality and quantity has to drop in order to keep profits high. So when we get angry about them raising prices and making everything smaller and taste like crap, they still win. And that's the point of this particular paragraph. When they talk about raising prices and justifying it with whatever phony baloney excuse they want to use, whether they're talking about the cost of labor, the cost of transporting food, the cost of making it overseas, they always win. Because, especially a company like Walmart, record profits every single year while paying your workers minimum wage, it's got to come from somewhere. They always win. They wouldn't stay in business. They would lock up every single business in America if they couldn't sustain their lifestyle. Because no business owner is going to live like his workers. They would tell you right away that it's not worth it. Why would you run a business and then live like your workers? You wouldn't do that because the whole point of running a business is to make yourself rich. So if you have to raise prices in order to make yourself richer, you're already rich, but you crush your customer and you crush your employee with raising prices and paying the minimum wage with as little perks as humanly possible, because rich people hate perks. They hate the idea of having to provide health care for their workers, so they make certain that they don't get over a certain amount of hours. They make it impossible for people to survive on those jobs. And then they do things like this, tell you that you would get angry because they'd have to raise prices. Talking point number two: if you're stuck in the same job, making the same wage year after year, ask yourself, what have you done to change your situation? Have you learned a new skill, taken a risk, or are you just grinding, hoping someone will hand you more money because you showed up? That to me is dirty. Giving you more money just because you showed up. And what did I say earlier? Only 1 in 5 people comes to work to actually work. Only 1 in 5 workers shows up to a job that they're actually interested in. The rest of the people around you at work are doing as little as humanly possible. They are just showing up. In a and what was that statistic? 65% of people are stuck in the job that they have, including myself, because there's nowhere to go. There are no other jobs. For the lower tier proletariat who's working in retail right now, the only thing they're going to do, if for some reason there's layoffs or you get caught doing something at work that you shouldn't be doing, and suddenly you find yourself out of work, you're not going to transition to anything better. You're just going to go somewhere else and you're going to show up, stick your hand out for the McPaycheck, and then wonder what you're supposed to do with this. I've shown over and over again on this channel that the McPaycheck isn't enough to survive on. The wages are uncomfortable. We're uncomfortable. And we're in a tug of war against the corporations who don't want to pay us anything because we're not worth anything. And they're raising prices on everything. Everything has gone up. Inflation is sky high. And to be told that you don't understand how business works, that you can't be paid more, that you can't be treated better, that the business owners and the job creators, they're right and you will always be wrong, because they're the ones that are entitled to benefit from your labor. You, as a proletariat person, are not allowed to benefit from your labor. You're just supposed to make enough so that you come back tomorrow. And that's the whole point of being labor in America. You're not supposed to get ahead. You're not supposed to do anything. What new skill are you? I absolutely despise when I hear this in the media. You need to upskill yourself. You need to do this. You need to go back to school. You need to take risks. You need to grind. You need to do all kinds of things. And at the end of the day, you're like, I get home from my crappy job. I'm tired. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm stressed out about how little money I make. And you want that person to start upskilling themselves in a skill that's already saturated with people who had the same idea. That's what I don't get about greedy corporations, is they always like to point the finger at you. Like, oh well, you should get some computer skills, or you should learn a trade, or you should do this or that. Or like when I worked in retail, every day of my retail life, someone would come up and tell me to get a better job. They never told me what that better job was, but it's a constant thing that we tell the proletariat: get a better job, make more money, go to school, start a business. And you're just standing there doing whatever ridiculous thing that they want you to do that day at the grocery store where you're working at. And you just kind of look at the customer, you blink at him a couple times, and then you pretend you don't hear it. Because they're speaking to you from this perspective of this person that's made it to a point in their life where they feel like they need to tell you that you're a loser. Every person that walked into the grocery store that I worked at called me a loser. Don't you think I know that if I'm wearing that uniform and wearing a name tag, that I've already failed? That the moment that I applied for this hourly job, that I knew I had failed at life. And I knew at that moment that my life would never get any better. This is a message that you need to hear. Your life isn't supposed to get better. All of the jobs out there are saturated with people who had one great idea that if they just did this, go to college, go to trade school, learn a new skill, or start a business that ends up failing. That's what we don't hear enough about in this country is what happens to you once you lose your business and you don't have wealthy parents. Once you lose your business, you are still going to have to pay back all the money that you owe the bank. And that could take the rest of your life. If you took out heavy loans to follow your dreams, that's one of the scariest things you should ever think about. Follow your dreams has been the end financially to millions of people who couldn't afford to fail. Right now, I'm a total failure. I'll acknowledge that. For a fact, I'm a total failure. I have to go back to a job that doesn't pay me enough to live. Don't you think I know that that makes me a failure and that I can never escape? And for those of you who are going to say, oh, you got to be more optimistic, you have to stop being pessimistic about life because if you don't have a positive attitude towards life, you're never going to reach a positive outcome. Let me tell you, there are tens of millions of people who aren't making it right now because of people who think like this. Because they think that because you show up every day, that you're the total loser. Because you shouldn't show up to work for them, because you should be working for yourself. But that's not the reality of the way that things are. Poor people are poor for a reason. The lack of opportunity, financial stability that should have been there when the second they were born. No child should be born to poor people. It's even when you go and you get a pet, when you adopt a dog in this country, you have to show financial responsibility. But you don't have to do that to be Susie Rottencrotch behind the Taco Bell. Susie can get knocked up from any Johnny Six Pack at any moment during the day, and no financial responsibility has to be shown. So once their children grow up and they realize there's nothing for them in the world and there's no one that's going to help them, then they become poor, lifelong poor, like myself. And guess what? Who do we blame? Do we blame the system for allowing them to have children? Or do we blame the system for wanting people to have more children to stick them into poverty and lifelong slavery for the corporations who feel this way about them? So let's get into my final talking point before I reach the end here. I know this won't be popular to say, but gratitude is underrated. We've forgotten how to appreciate what we have. A steady job is a privilege. You hear that, proletariat? A steady job at the bottom for minimum wage, for not enough to feed yourself on, is still considered a privilege according to rich people. It is not a right. It's a foundation to build on, not an end game. Okay, let's unpack that. It's a foundation to build on, not an end game. So for all those tens of millions of people who are making minimum wage right now, you're working on your foundation. This isn't where you're supposed to end up. But tell me, where's the ladder to build on? How, once I build my foundation of working for the minimum wage for my whole life, I want to see that ladder that you're going to pull down into my wage cage and I'm going to climb out and reach my end game. The reality is that all of life is smoke and mirrors. You're being gaslit into believing in a system that only sees you as labor. These rich people really feel this way. A steady job is not a privilege. They'll tell you any job is a privilege to have because that's the way they think. That's the way they justify the way that they treat ordinary workers, that they're giving you some sort of foundation to build your life on. Well, I'm sitting here after spending my entire life working. Where's what am I supposed to have? Am I still supposed to be waiting to build this foundation? I don't think so. But let's get into the final point here in toxic positivity. If this message upsets you, maybe it's because it hits too close to home. The truth is, the only person responsible for your financial future is you. So, are you going to keep pointing fingers or are you going to start taking control? Taking control. Really? Are we really going to take control at the minimum wage? This whole story is absolutely ridiculous. The talking points of someone who hasn't had to deal with rising costs of everything, a person that's so out of touch that they really believe these things, that they're giving you opportunities and pathways towards a brilliant future, and that by thinking negatively, you're only going to stay there. I can tell you, all the positive thinking in the world isn't going to help you out of your minimum wage work. And without having the experience, the education, and worst of all, the connections. I've said this 100 times on this channel. You don't have the connections, immense effort doesn't mean anything because it takes just one person with money to lift you out of where you are into a high paying career. Not a job, but an actual career that has possibility. The rest of us are just going to work one long, go nowhere job for the rest of our lives.